2017, I've told this story before. I saw Joe Biden do a book tour event. The moderator was Atul Gawande, a doctor, a very friendly guy. Joe Biden speaking to a big auditorium, and it was a disaster. And it was exactly what we saw later. He was glassy-eyed, had trouble following the conversation. I can't find video of that event anywhere on the internet. I'm a little suspicious about that. Elsewhere, though, on that tour, because I went and looked at the book tour again, 2017, he was fine. Again, good days and bad days. But the bad day that I saw, and it was an evening event, made me worried and say, he's never going to run for anything ever again. He's got a big problem. You didn't see anything till 2019, correct?
Yeah, I will say also, I think in 2017, well, I'll tell you, I had talked about Bo's death on the show, and had talked about extraordinary speech that Bobby Kennedy gave after the death of Martin Luther King, and he talked about the awful grace of God, and I spoke about Bo that way, the awful grace of God, drip by drip, until we understand actually the mercy. And he called me then, and I've thought back on it a good bit. I really do think so. If you're talking about a 2017 book events, so I think those really good and really bad days certainly accelerated after the death of Bo Biden. And I suspect also Hunter this was Mika's operating theory during the campaign, Hunter's conviction, and all of those problems also just, again, had a profound impact on him. I think 2019 was the first time I called you and said, I'm not sure if this guy is going to run. And and I think we agreed on that based on some observations.
Yeah, we both had direct and indirect experiences with him in 2019 that made us think, boy, it just doesn't seem like he's got the focus to do it, because he has some bad days. We also both had the experience that he had plenty of good days. This is an event that got written about by a Wall Street Journal columnist. I wasn't at this event, but once it occurred, I heard from a bunch of people. This is Joe Biden in 2020 as a presidential candidate in South Carolina.
My name's Joe Biden. I'm a Democratic candidate for the United States Senate. Look me over. If you like what you see, help out. If not, vote for the other guy. Give me a look, though, okay? That's all I've really got to say to you. I got 2 minutes and 30 seconds left. I'm looking at the clock down here.
So he said he's running for Senate, and he said, don't vote for the other Biden. We all know that part of the defense of the pro-Biden people was, oh, he's always had malapropisms. He's always speaking in a certain way. But I looked at that tape and other events in that cycle, the first time he ran. That's a different brain processing than Joe Biden, diarrhea of the mouth.
I think this may be where we disagree. I mean, Joe Biden's always been Joe Biden. Joe Biden's always said crazy things. You go back to the 1987 campaign. You go back to, you go back and you look at what happened in 2007, 2008.
But that's speaking inartfully. Like when he said Barack Obama was clean and articulate. That's artful. That's different. I mean, again, you and I both, public speaking, we're live all the time. We could make a mistake, but you don't look at that video and see the look in his eyes and hear him say, I'm running for Senate, vote for the other Biden. You don't see that as I did then and do now as part of the decline, or do you?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, again, this is a sort of thing. There are a couple of things like this that, we agree on so many things. There are a couple of things that we disagree on. And one is the Congresswoman who had passed away that he mentioned that I'm sure we'll be looking at too, where I look at that as being Joe Biden getting up there, getting flustered, and he's had in his recording, sort of recording in his brain since he was since he was 29. I'm Joe Biden. I'm running for Senate, and I'd love your vote. I think also, Mark, and you mentioned this before, we've both gotten up and spoken. I've unfortunately spent 30 years talking way too much. And, there will be times I will say Mitterrand. Mitterrand and Trump just don't get along. And, it'll be like during the break where Alex will get in my ear.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
I say Alex will get in my ear and say it's Macron, not Mitterrand. But you
Right.
you think that that clip is
This is where
telling.
you make me mental. That clip to me, there's a through line from that clip to the debate in 2024. He's losing it when he's having a bad night. His brain is not firing. It's not what happens when we say Mitterrand instead of Kohl.
Right.
His brain, that's how I perceive that. Okay.
So let me ask you though, because this happens with other politicians. We've seen other politicians do this before, and this is not whataboutism. But when Donald Trump talked constantly about World War II, and when he talked about all the other crazy things he talked about during the campaign,
Mixed up Nancy Pelosi and
Nancy Pelosi and Nancy
what's
Mace
her name?
or whomever.
No,
I don't
it
even.
was Nikki Haley. It was Nikki
Nikki Haley, exactly.
Yeah.
I think they're both from South Carolina. But yeah, I mean, I've seen that a good bit, especially in older politicians. And I think for me, the question is, you know, does that impact his governing or not? This is the great mystery for me, Mark. And maybe you can help answer this. Like, so you see a through line that through 24. That to me is like bumbling Joe Biden that I've seen for a very long time. But when did you first notice this decline? Do you trace it back to 2017?
That book event I went to 2017, where I turned to my wife after the event and I said, "Thank goodness he'll never run for anything again." And how could his family let him do this book tour? And again, to me, this is why I get so frustrated. As much as we agree about this, to me, it's just obvious through line. What I saw in 2017, what I see in that South Carolina event, what I see when he addresses the dead woman, Congresswoman from Indiana, which we'll play in a second. I see the through line of the bad days are increasing, and the bad days, you wouldn't want a CEO or a president having a bad day at a time of crisis. Let's play. You and I have thought about this a million times. 104, Joe Biden at an event in part honoring a dead congresswoman from Indiana talks to her.
Because I believe we can use these advances to do even more to make America stronger and a healthier nation. And so many of you know so much about this as well, and you're committed. And I want to thank all of you here for including bipartisan elected officials like Representative Governor, Senator Braun, Senator Booker, Representative Jackie. Are you here? Where's Jackie? I didn't think she was going to be here to help make this a reality.
Again, you and I have talked about this so much. I know you think I over rely on the example, but that is not Mitterrand or saying Mitterrand instead of Kohl. That is talking to a dead person whose the event was on her behalf. How can that not be like a signature signal moment where the country and the media said there's a big problem?
Yeah, I mean that's a concern, and it was reported on, I'm sure.
Barely.
And so what would you have at that point? Do you pull up the stakes and say because he did that, get out of the race?
It's up to him, but it was asked about at the White House briefing. And the White House press secretary said the reason Joe Biden talked to a dead congresswoman was because it was top of mind for him. She was top of mind. Again, this is not a joke, and it's not about the 2024 election. It's about the commander in chief, who had no access to his doctor. And again, you want to bring up Donald Trump confusing people, it's fine. But right now we're talking about Joe Biden. I just look at that and say, like, if that were my dad, in a public role, and he started talking to a dead congresswoman, I would take him for some emergency tests.